My name is Cullan Reid, and I will be talking about the academic language of EdTPA. So first off, for those of you who do not know about EdTPA, it is an assessment of how a student teacher does during their portion of the time student teaching. The assessment involves 3 tasks. Tasks 1 and 3 are mostly written portions, with task 2 being a majority of the video that you took during your lesson. Now, to graduate from ONU, you need to pass EdTPA. So this isn't something that you should take lightly, even though it is near your graduation when you will be officially submitting the whole assignment. You should obviously plan ahead of time and review the material that you plan on submitting. Now, what are some areas to consider when writing your submission to EdTPA? Well, there's a lot. There are tons of rubrics that can kind of confuse you as to what you really need to put into your submission. But one thing is clear, you need to understand academic language. So this video, I'll break down the main points you should understand about academic language. The formal definition of academic language represents the language of discipline, school, community, or culture that people must learn and use to participate and engage in meaningful ways. So for me, being in engineering education, mainly teaching inside a math classroom for my EdTPA submission, I want to know and use math and engineering academic language. But math is hard because sometimes the math terms do not mean the same as the English definitions. For example, table and table. Table in math is a chart or amount of organized data, and obviously a table in the English setting is where you eat dinner. Same deal with ruler and ruler. Ruler in English is a person exercising government, and in math is a measurement tool. And engineering is kind of similar to math, as the definitions sometimes do not equal the English definitions. So a good example would be vacuum and vacuum. An English term for vacuum would be something to clean the house with, as an engineering term would be something that does not have air resistance, like a cylinder where you drop a ball and it does not have air resistance would be a vacuum. So with math and engineering, clearly defining terms is crucial for understanding, because if you assume your students know, then they may be left behind throughout the lesson. And with the math and engineering terminology, you have to use it in the classroom so that students become familiar with it. And again, academic language is specific to your content area, so the language for math is different for social studies and it's different for science and language arts. So getting the academic language fully understood across your classroom requires language demands. Language demands are crucial in the academic language. The definition of language demands is specific ways that academic language is used by students to participate in learning tasks through reading, writing, listening, and/or speaking to demonstrate their understanding. There are 4 main categories for language demand. First is vocabulary, language functions, discourse, and syntax. Let's go through all those. The first, again, is vocabulary, and that includes the words or phrases that are used within your discipline. So you want to clearly define vocabulary words that have different meanings depending on their context. So relating back to the table and ruler, ruler, vacuum, vacuum, you want to clearly define those terms. You also want to define general academic vocabulary used across the disciplines. So some great examples are to compare, analyze, evaluate. Those are not just specific to math, but might be said in a math classroom, so it's good to define them. And then you want to define subject-specific words that are only related to your discipline. So that's multiplication or subtraction too. Language functions. Language functions would be the content and language focus of learning tasks represented by the active verbs within the learning outcomes. So some examples would be list, label, define, describe, explain, justify, and summarize. Discourse. Discourse includes the structure of written and oral language, as well as how members of the discipline talk, write, and participate in knowledge construction. Discipline-specific discourse has distinctive features or ways of structuring oral or written language that provides useful ways for the content to be communicated. So that'd be like if you're talking, it'd be think, pair, share, or a classroom discussion. And written would be write a sentence explaining your answer or write a reflection. Syntax is basically how you support students and their learning use. The formal definition of syntax is a set of conventional organization symbols, words, or phrases together into structures. That can be done in a math as formulas, charts, outlines, and Venn diagrams. Overall, academic language represents the language of discipline, school, community, culture that people must learn and use to participate and engage in a meaningful way. The language demand is made up of 4 parts again, and they are the vocabulary, the language function, discourse, and syntax. So remembering the definitions of academic language and language demand will help you score very high on the EdTPA. Here are my credits, and I hope that in my references, I hope that you have learned something today about academic language and language demand, and I thank you for your time.